The small town sat quiet under the fading sun, its narrow streets glowing orange as the day slipped into evening. James Walker, a man in his early 30s, leaned against the fence of his old farmhouse. His father had left him the house years ago, but the land was large and hard to manage. He had served in the military once, and though he carried himself with strength, his eyes revealed the quiet weight of solitude. Life had grown still to still. The war he once fought in the outer colonies had changed him. He had seen Ely and fire burn across skies, watched entire cities fall to dust, and stood against creatures taller and stronger than men. Now, back on Earth, he struggled with silence more than any battle. What he needed, he told himself, was help, a housekeeper who could manage the daily life he no longer had the will for. When he placed the request through a local agency, he expected an ordinary woman from town. Instead, fate delivered something else entirely. On the third morning, as the sun climbed over the hills, a vehicle appeared near his gate. Its design was not one James had ever seen before. Sleek metal, strange symbols glowing along its side, and engines that hummed with a low, alien pulse. James felt his chest tighten as he walked forward from the doorway of the craft. She stepped out. She was not like anyone he had ever seen. Tall, graceful, with silver hair that shimmered under the light. Her eyes glowed faintly, like twin stars, and her skin carried a soft greenish hue, marked with faint patterns that moved as if alive. She looked human and yet not, a perfect balance. Familiar and otherworldly. She carried no weapons, only a small satchel. "I am here for the position," she said in a voice calm and steady. James froze. "Position? The role of housekeeper," she replied simply, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. His mind raced. Was this a trick? A test from some alien authority? Had the war followed him here, to his quiet home? He almost reached for the old rifle leaning against the porch rail, but stopped himself. Something in her expression, something steady, tired, and oddly gentle, held him still. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Lyra," she answered. "I will serve, if you allow it." James struggled to believe this was happening, but his life, he knew, had never followed the path of ordinary men. Against all logic, he nodded. "All right, come inside." From that day forward, life on the farm shifted. Lyra was efficient, silent, and oddly careful. She prepared meals with precision, managed the grounds with strength that seemed far beyond human, and moved through the house with an elegance that made the old farmhouse feel almost alive again. But James noticed things, small things. At night, her eyes glowed faintly, casting soft light in the dark halls. Sometimes she spoke words in a language he couldn't understand, her voice carrying an echo as though the voices spoke at once. And once, late at night, he heard her cry softly in her room. Though in the morning she carried herself as if nothing had happened, days turned to weeks, and though she remained distant, a bond began to form between them. She listened when he spoke, though she rarely answered much. When he told her of the war, of the men he lost, she lowered her head as if she too carried such grief. One evening, as rain struck the farmhouse roof, James finally asked, "Why are you here? You could be anywhere. Why clean the home of a soldier who has nothing left?" For a long moment, Lyra said nothing. Then she looked at him, and in her glowing eyes he saw something he had never expected: fear. "Because I am not safe," she whispered. "And neither are you." The words sank deep into him. Before he could question further, a strange hum filled the night air, the same sound he had heard in war zones far from Earth. He rushed to the window and saw lights moving across the clouds, sharp and precise. His chest tightened. War had followed him, and now, with Lyra standing silently behind him, James realized his quiet life was about to end forever. The storm outside grew heavier, rain hammering against the old wooden walls of the farmhouse. James stood at the window, his fists tight at his sides, staring at the strange lights that hovered in the night sky. The humming grew louder, steady and cold, unlike anything from Earth. His soldier instincts told him one truth: This was no coincidence. Behind him, Lyra remained silent. Her glowing eyes reflected the storm's flashes, calm yet sorrowful, as though she had known this moment would come. James turned sharply to her. "What are they?" he asked. His voice carried the sharp edge of command he once used in war. She hesitated before answering. "Hunters, they seek me." James felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Hunters? From where?" Her eyes lowered. "From beyond the colonies. They're soldiers of my people. But I am no longer theirs. I left. I broke their laws. To them, I am a traitor." James ran a hand through his hair, pacing the floor. "And you came here, to me? Do you understand what danger you brought to my home?" Lyra's expression shifted. "Pain, but steady. I understand. But I had no choice. They would have killed me. Here, I thought I could hide, serve quietly, perhaps even live." He wanted to be angry, but the sight of her standing there so strange, yet so human in her grief stopped him. He had seen soldiers break under war, seen men flee, seen guilt written in their eyes. Hers was the same. The hum outside grew sharper, closer. James reached for the old rifle by the door, the one he had promised himself he would never touch again. His hands moved with muscle memory, checking the chamber, studying the grip. "You can't fight them," Lyra said softly. "Maybe not," James answered. "But I'll be damned if I let them walk through my door without a fight, for the first time since." She arrived. Lyra's cold composure cracked. A flicker of something respect, maybe even sorrow moved across her face. She stepped closer. "If you stand with me, they will mark you too. You will never be safe again." James met her eyes. His jaw tight. "Safety's a lie. I learned that in the war. If they want you, they'll have to come through me." The hum outside shifted, the lights spreading wider across the sky, like a net closing in. Then, silence. The storm still raged, but the alien craft above vanished into the clouds as if retreating. James lowered the rifle, confused. "They're gone." "No," Lyra whispered. "They are watching, waiting. They will test you before they strike. They always do." The words hung in the air like heavy smoke. James knew he should feel anger at being dragged into another conflict. But instead, a strange fire stirred inside him. He had been lost since returning from war, drifting through days with no purpose. Now, standing beside her, he felt the old weight of duty return. Later that night, when the storm quieted, James sat at the wooden kitchen table. Lyra prepared a simple meal, moving with silent grace. The faint glow of her markings lit the dim room like fireflies. "You never told me why you left them," James said quietly. She paused, her hands tightening round the dish she held. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a voice that carried both strength and pain, she spoke. "My people believe in purity," she said. "They see themselves as perfect, untouched by other blood. But I believed different. I saw humans in the war. I saw their courage, their strength, their fire. I fell in love with what I saw. That was my crime." James froze, his chest tightening. He had expected many answers: betrayal, desertion, fear, but not that. She turned to him, and for a moment the glowing in her eyes dimmed, revealing a rare vulnerability. "I carry their hatred now," she continued, "and they will never forgive me. They will never forgive us." The room fell silent, the sound of the storm fading outside. James studied her, seeing not just an alien but someone broken, exiled, yet still standing. He remembered his own battles, his own scars. Perhaps, he thought, they were not so different. Finally, he spoke. "Then let them come. I'm done running from war. If they want to take you, they'll have to take me too." Lyra's lips parted as if to answer, but no words came. Instead, a faint warmth touched her face, something that looked almost like hope. But as the night grew still, James knew the silence outside was only temporary. The hunters had not left. They were circling, waiting, and when they returned, it would not just be for Lyra, it would be for him too. The morning came to quiet. The rain had cleared, leaving the fields wet and glistening under the pale sun. James stepped out onto the porch, rifle slung over his shoulder. The air smelled fresh. But something about the silence unsettled him. No birds sang, no insects stirred. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath. Lyra followed him outside. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, but her expression remained heavy. Her glowing eyes scanning the skies. James glanced at her. There, out there, aren't they? She nodded slowly. Hunters never leave without finishing their task. They are patient. They will test us first, probe our defenses, study our strength. If we show weakness, they will strike without mercy. James gritted his teeth. He had spent years fighting wars across the colonies. He knew the feeling of being watched, the tension of an enemy circling just out of sight. His instincts screamed at him that a battle was coming up by midday. The first sign appeared. A strange object streaked across the horizon, leaving behind a faint trail of blue fire. It was small, fast, and mechanical. James raised his rifle, tracking it, but Lyra placed a hand on his arm. "Not yet," she whispered. "They are only watching." Hours passed, the air thick with tension. James busied himself repairing the old fence near the barn, though his eyes never left the sky. Lyra worked beside him, though her movements seemed distracted, her gaze constantly scanning the tree-lined dot as the sun dipped lower. The test arrived. A sharp crack echoed across the field, followed by a searing flash. The barn's roof split open as a burst of blue energy ripped through it. The old structure shook violently, with splintering and falling in showers of sparks. James ducked instinctively, pulling Lyra down with him. His heart hammered as he scanned the sky. Above, 3 small hunter drones hovered, their sleek black frames glowing with alien light. "They're probing us," Lyra hissed, her eyes narrowing. "Measuring how you respond." James raised his rifle, took aim, and fired. The crack of the bullet tore through the air, striking one of the drones. It spun violently, sparking before crushing into the wet field. The other two darted back, weaving erratically, before retreating into the clouds. Silence returned, broken only by the distant crackling of the burning barn. James lowered the rifle, breathing hard. "They're testing me, all right. But I've faced worse." Lyra studied him, her expression unreadable. "You struck one that will not go unnoticed. Now they will know you are not just a man hiding in a farmhouse." James glanced at her. "Good. Let them know." As night fell, the farmhouse carried a tense stillness. James patched what he could of the barn, though much of it was destroyed. Lyra moved through the house with quiet efficiency. The James could see the weight pressing on her dot later. They sat at the kitchen table again, the glow of a lantern casting warm shadows across the walls. James leaned back, arms crossed, staring at her. "You should tell me everything," he said firmly. "If I'm already marked by these hunters, I deserve to know what I'm fighting for." Lyra's hands tightened around her cup. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, with a quiet breath, she began. "My people are called the Archon. They believe themselves chosen, pure, destined to rule the stars. They see hybrids, children born of other blood, as abominations. When I served as one of their guardians, I witnessed cruelty done in the name of purity. Families torn apart, children taken. I could not endure it. I left, and when I left," she paused, her voice trembling slightly, "I carried within me a choice that made me their enemy forever." James frowned. "A choice?" Her glowing eyes lifted to his, and for a moment he thought he saw pain as deep as his own scars. "One day, you will understand." He wanted to press her, but something in her tone stopped him. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice steady. "So, what do they want now? To kill you?" Lyra shook her head slowly. "Not only that, they want to erase what I represent. If they destroy me, they destroy hope for anyone like me. And if they destroy you, they prove humans are weak and unworthy." James stared at her, his fists tightening. He thought of the war, of the battles he fought where humans were underestimated, dismissed, crushed until they proved their strength. He thought of the soldiers who died beside him, men who gave everything to show humanity's place among the stars. "They'll regret underestimating us." James said, his voice low but fierce. Lyra studied him carefully. Then, for the first time, a faint smile touched her lips. It was small, fleeting, but it softened her sharp features. Perhaps, she said. That night, James lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. He could hear the faint hum in the distance, the hunters circling, waiting. His hand rested on the rifle by his side. He knew this was only the beginning. The real battle had yet to come, and as he drifted into an easy sleep, he could not shake the thought that his life had been changed forever the moment Lyra stepped out of that Ely and Craft, the following morning broke with a strange, heavy stillness. The fields glistened under the dew, but James felt no peace in the sight. He stood outside with the rifle across his back, scanning the skies with narrowed eyes. The hunters had tested them once. They would not wait long before striking harder. Lyra moved silently behind him, her glowing eyes watching the horizon. She carried herself with a poise that was almost regal, yet there was something tense in her steps, something that betrayed the weight of what was coming. They know you are not ordinary, she said quietly. They saw how you fought. Now, they will test us both. James let out a slow breath. Good. Let them come. I didn't survive a war just to hide in my own home. By midday, the storm returned, not of rain, but of fire. A shriek tore through the skies as 300 crafts descended, their black hulls cutting through the clouds like knives. Energy beams shot down in brilliant arcs, striking the fields and sending soil bursting into the air. The farmhouse shook under the force of the blasts, windows rattling and wood groaning as if the very earth cried out. Inside, James shouted, pulling Lyra by the arm as they rushed into the farmhouse. He grabbed his rifle, checking the chamber as his heartbeat thundered in his ears. Lyra raised her hand, and for the first time, James saw her power. Her glowing patterns brightened across her skin, lines of light spreading like living fire. Her eyes flared, and with a gesture, a shimmering shield of energy rippled into being across the doorway. The first beam struck, colliding against the shield with a sound like cracking glass. Sparks flew, and the air burned with the scent of ozone. James stared at her, stunned. You could do this all along, he demanded. I hope I wouldn't have to, she answered. Her voice strained as the shield shuddered under the assault. But now, there is no choice. James positioned himself beside her, aiming his rifle through a broken window. A drone swooped low, its black frame glowing as it charged a weapon. James fired. The bullet striking true, the machine spun. Smoke trailing, it fell into the field with an explosion of dirt and flame. Two more circled, weaving in deadly arcs. Lyra's shield strained as another beam slammed against it, cracking across the surface. Her face twisted with effort. I cannot hold it for long. Then we fight together, James growled. The second drone swooped, firing a pulse of energy that shook the walls. James fired again, but the bullet ricocheted off its armored hull. The machine turned toward the house, preparing another strike. Before it could fire, Lyra thrust her hands forward. A surge of blue-white light shot from her palms, striking the drone mid-flight. It screeched as its frame twisted violently, then burst into fragments that rained down across the fields. James blinked, momentarily stunned by the display. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Lyra gave no answer, her glowing markings dimmed slightly as she staggered, catching herself on the table. Her strength was fading. The last drone descended lower, almost skimming the ground as it aimed directly for the farmhouse. James studied his rifle, waiting, calculating. He exhaled and fired at the exact moment it began its attack. The bullet pierced through its glowing eye, and the machine spiraled out of control, crashing into the far side of the barn with a thunderous explosion. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of flames from the barn ruins. The shield flickered and dissolved, leaving Lyra pale and trembling. James rushed to her side, studying her as she nearly collapsed. Easy, you're hurt. She shook her head faintly. Not hurt. Just drained. My energy is not endless. Each use takes from me. He guided her to a chair, his jaw tight. Then you save it for when it counts. I'll handle the rest. Her glowing eyes met his, filled with something unspoken. For the first time, there was no distance in her gaze, only trust. You are unlike the others, she whispered. No human I have seen would stand as you have. James gave a half smile, though his eyes remained hard. That's because they don't know what humans are capable of. But as the smoke drifted into the sky, James knew this was only a beginning. The hunters would not stop after one failed attempt. They had seen him fight, seen her reveal her power. Now they would return in greater numbers. And when they did, he would have to be ready not only to defend his home, but to protect Lyra from the enemies that hunted her across the stars. That night, as Lyra rested, James sat awake by the window, rifle across his lap. His eyes never left the horizon. He had faced war before, but this felt different. This time, he was not just fighting for survival. He was fighting for something greater. The night stretched long and restless. James sat by the window with his rifle, watching the horizon where smoke still rose from the wreckage of the drone. The house smelled faintly of burnt wood, and the ground outside bore scars of battle. For all his years in war, James had never thought he'd face enemies again on his own land. Lyra stirred in the next room, her soft footsteps moving across the floor. When she emerged, the glow of her markings was faint, her silver hair loose over her shoulders. She looked tired, yet her eyes burned with determination. They will return, she said quietly. James nodded, jaw tight. I know they will. Not send drones next time, she continued. They will come themselves. And when they do, there will be no escape. James set his rifle on the table, leaning forward. Then you need to tell me everything. No more secrets, Lyra. I deserve to know why they're after you and what you've really brought to my door. Her gaze lingered on him for a long time, filled with hesitation. Finally, she sat across from him, her hands folding neatly in her lap. My people call themselves the Archon, she began, her voice low but steady. For thousands of years, they have ruled the stars, believing themselves the perfect race. But perfection, to them, means purity. They forbid bonds with other species. They forbid love beyond their kind. To break that law is to invite death. James studied her, his eyes narrowing. And you broke it, she nodded. I did. I fell in love with someone I should not have. A human soldier, brave and foolish. When the war ended, I carried something they could never allow to exist. James felt his breath catch. The words struck him harder than any gunshot. You mean, yes, she said softly, a child, a hybrid, blood of Archon and human. Silence fell heavy between them. James's heart hammered in his chest as the meaning sank in. All the danger, all the hunters. It wasn't just about her. It was about what she carried, the legacy of two species bound in one life. Where is the child? James asked finally, his voice quiet but firm. Lyra lowered her head. Safe, hidden far from here. They believe if they destroy me, they can erase his existence too. But if they find him, they will kill him without mercy. James leaned back, the weight of her confession pressing down on him. He thought of his own comrades, of men who had fought for survival and legacy. A child caught between worlds, hunted for simply being born. It tore at him in ways he hadn't expected. Why come here? He asked. Why me? Her glowing eyes lifted to his, shimmering in the lantern light. Because you are different. I saw it the moment you opened your door. You carry the scars of war. Yet you still stand. You understand loss. You understand what it means to fight when everything is against you. And I knew you would not turn me away. James let out a sharp laugh, bitter and weary. You brought a war to my doorstep, liar. You've made me a target. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. And I am sorry, but I have nowhere else to go. For a moment, anger flared in James's chest. He thought of his quiet life, the peace he had tried to build. But as he looked at her, at the sorrow in her face, at the fragile hope burning in her eyes, his anger faded into something else. Resolve. He reached across the table, resting his hand over hers. Then we fight together. If they want your child erased, If they want this legacy destroyed, they'll have to go through me. Her lips parted, and for the first time, true warmth touched her face. A small, but real. You would stand against an empire for me? James squeezed her hand firmly. For you, for that child, for the chance that maybe humans aren't as weak as your people believe. Before she could respond, a sudden crash echoed outside. Both of them shot to their feet. Through the window, James saw movement, dark figures stepping out of the tree line, their armor glinting under the pale moonlight. The hunters had arrived, not machines this time, but living soldiers. Lyra's glow flared brighter, her markings igniting like fire. James grabbed his rifle, his pulse racing. They've come for you, he said. No. Lyra answered, her voice sharp, steady, and filled with fire. They've come for us. The night burned with tension as shadows moved across the wet fields. The hunters advanced in silence, their dark armor glimmering with pale alien light. Their tall frames moved with eerie precision, each carrying weapons that hummed with deadly energy. James counted at least 6, more than he could fight alone. But he was not alone. Lyra stepped forward, her silver hair flowing in the moonlight, her glowing markings brightening with each breath. She looked less like a housekeeper and more like what she truly was, a warrior, exiled from her people. James stood beside her, rifle tight in his hands, heart pounding but steady. They will not stop, Lyra whispered. If they kill us, they will hunt until every trace of me and my child is gone. Then we don't. Give them the chance, James said firmly. The hunters spread out, forming a half circle around the farmhouse. One of them raised his weapon and spoke in a deep, cold voice that echoed unnaturally through the night. Lyra of the Arkan, you are charged with treason. You are ordered to surrender. The human will be spared if he abandons you. James spat on the ground, his voice sharp. Not a chance. The hunter tilted his head, as if studying him. Then, without another word, the soldiers raised their weapons. Blue energy lit the air. The first shot screamed across the field, striking the porch and sending with splintering. James fired back instantly, dropping to one knee. His bullet hit a hunter square on the chest. The alien staggered, but did not fall. Their armor was stronger than steel. Lyra raised her hands, her glow exploding into brilliant light. A shield spread wide, covering both of them. Energy blast slammed against it, sparks scattering across the ground. Her face twisted with effort, her body trembling as she held the barrier. I can't hold it long, she cried. Then don't, James growled. He fired through a gap in the shield, his bullets striking weak points at the joints of the hunter. Armor, one fell, collapsing into the mud. Another roared as a shot pierced its shoulder, staggering backward. But there were too many. A beam cut through the shield, grazing Lyra's side. She gasped, stumbling as her glow flickered. James caught her, rage flaring in his chest. He pulled her behind cover and aimed again, his hand steady despite the firestorm. Stay down, he ordered. No, she whispered, blood glistening faintly against her skin. Her eyes burned brighter than ever. I will not run. Summoning the last of her strength, Lyra stepped out from behind the broken wall. Her body glowed like a living star, her markings blazing across her skin. With a cry that shook the air, she unleashed a wave of light. The hunters staggered as the energy tore across the field, to fell instantly, their armor cracking under the force. Others raised their arms, struggling to resist the blast. The night lit up like a second sun. James seized the moment. He fired again and again, his bullets finding the gaps Lyra's power exposed. One by one, the hunters fell until only their leader remained. The last hunter stood tall, his armor scorched, but unbroken. He raised his weapon at Lyra, his voice booming, you cannot win. The child will never belong. He will never survive. James stepped forward, rifle raised, his voice cutting like steel. You don't decide who survives. We do. He pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the hunter's helm, shattering it in a spray of sparks. The alien collapsed, lifeless, into the mud. Silence fell at last. The night was broken only by James's heavy breaths and the faint crackle of flames from the ruined barn. Lyra sank to her knees, her glow fading slowly, her body trembling with exhaustion. James rushed to her side, steadying her. "It's over," he said, though his voice was weary. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with both pain and relief. "For now, they will send more. But tonight, we proved something." James nodded, his chest rising and falling. "That humans don't run, that we stand." A faint smile touched her lips, though her eyes shimmered with tears. "You are more than they ever believed." "Perhaps so is he." James knew she meant the child, a hybrid born of two worlds. Hunted but alive, a child who represented not weakness, but hope. He tightened his grip around her, helping her stand. "Then we'll make sure he gets that chance, no matter what it takes." The two of them stood together in the moonlit field, the wreckage of hunters scattered round them. The farmhouse behind them was broken, the land scarred, but something new had taken root in the ashes, a bond forged in fire, a promise stronger than fear. For James, who once thought his war was over, a new purpose had begun, and for Lyra, who once carried only exile and sorrow, she had found something she thought lost forever, a family. Together, they looked to the stars, knowing the fight was not finished, but neither were they.